Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my must-start and must-sit wide receivers for week number 15 of the 2022 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So this video is also brought to you guys by DraftKings Sportsbook. We're going to talk about them a little bit later. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 15 must start and must sit wide receivers. We begin with my number one must-start wide receiver of the week, Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers, going up against the LA Rams on prime time on Monday Night Football at home in Green Bay. The Packers were on bye in week number 14, so we got to go ahead and look back towards week number 13 for his stats. In week 13, up against a putrid Chicago Bears defense in Chicago, Christian Watson finished the week as the wide receiver number 6.5 PPR, having 3 receptions on 7 targets for 48 yards and a touchdown, as well as having 1 rush for 46 yards and a score. He has had 4 straight games of 19 or more half PPR points, over 6 targets in each of those 4 games, and we are going to continue to ride the hot streak until the metaphorical wheels on this bus fall off. The Rams rank 23rd in defense up against the pass via DVOA, so I think we are in for yet another smash spot out of Christian Watson. It is very evident watching the Packers games that ever since Christian Watson has taken over a couple of weeks ago, that he is the clear number 1 weapon for Aaron Rodgers on this team, and the LA Rams defense, while it has looked a little bit better recently, ultimately, I don't think they stand much of a chance up against Christian Watson, who I think goes absolutely fucking nuclear this week, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he finished inside of the top 10 at the wide receiver position this week in week number 15. Next up, we move to my number 2 must-start wide receiver, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mr. Corvette of the Kansas City Chiefs, going up against the Houston Texans in Houston this week. Last week, up against the Denver Broncos in Denver, Juju was the wide receiver number 7 in half PPR, having 9 receptions on 11 targets for 74 yards as well as a touchdown. This was the first week we have seen ramped up production following his injury. After his injury, once he returned, it was like, oh, give him 3-4 targets a game. And then when you get 3-4 targets a game, I know he's on the Chiefs, so maybe he could have broke one for a fucking touchdown. You probably aren't going to put up huge numbers. But once he starts getting 8+ targets like we were kind of accustomed to when we saw him on that very solid streak in the middle of the season, we could see Juju finish as a top 12 wide receiver from here on out, and Juju could honestly be a league-winning wide receiver. And again, during that kind of spot of games where he wasn't really performing that well, he saw 4 or fewer targets for 3 straight games. So again, you're not really going to do too much with limited targets. The Texans actually ranked 17th against the pass in DVOA, so they're not as dick cheese as you might have thought just watching the games. You know, the Texans get beat up a lot, but they're not as bad against the pass. But come on, with Patrick Mahomes under center, with Juju Smith-Schuster looking as good as he looked last week up against a stout Denver Broncos defense, I think he could erupt Mount Vesuvius style all over the Houston Texans defense. Next up, we move to my number 3 must-start wide receiver, and that is Zay Jones of the Jacksonville Jaguars, going up against the Dallas Cowboys this week at home in Jacksonville. Week 14 at the Tennessee Titans, he was the wide receiver number 9 on the week in half PPR, having 8 receptions on 12 targets for 77 yards and a score. That performance out of Zay Jones is not a fucking fluke. It's not a fluke because he has had 4 straight games with over 7 targets, and 3 of those 4 games, he had 10 or more targets. Now, I know people are going to start to panic. They're going to say, but Nick, Dallas ranks 1st in pass DVOA. Sure. They do. I'm not trying to say that DVOA is some terrible stat because I've used DVOA to prop up the other players. But ultimately, the Jacksonville Jaguars are hot. And they're not just hot, they are on fucking fire, NBA Jam style. They are heating up. They are as hot as they could get. And I understand the Dallas defense is good, but we just saw what Houston did to them. And again, I'm not saying that Houston is this great team. Of course they're not. They are probably the worst team in the NFL. Easily. But at the end of the day, I still think with Trevor Lawrence riding hot, Doug Peterson calling the plays, this seems like a great scenario for back-to-back solid weeks out of Zay Jones. So I'm going to continue to believe in Zay Jones and start him this week with extreme confidence up against the Dallas Cowboys defense. But before we pivot into my must-sit wide receivers, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Now, if you're a brand new user to DraftKings Sportsbook and click on the link in the video description down below or in the pinned comment, you can activate your offer. If you bet $5 on any sport pregame money line from now until December 30th, you will win $150 in free bets if your team wins. Notice how I said if your team wins. So I'm going to throw it on the screen right now. We're going to go to college basketball because they have by far the largest favorites. And we're going to go with the biggest favorite of the day, and that is Colorado minus 6,000 versus North Alabama. You bet $5 on Colorado minus 6,000, and as long as they beat North Alabama, which is what the odds are telling us, again, they're minus 6,000. Upsets can happen, sure, but minus 6,000, they should be able to win, and you will receive $150 in free bets. Also important to note, if you live in Maryland, you will actually receive $200 in free bets. Again, all you gotta do is click on the link in the video description or in the pinned comment to activate your offer. Back on into things here. We got the must-sit wide receivers, beginning with Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts, going up against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. The Colts were on bye in week number 14, so we gotta go ahead and hop into the time machine to look back towards week number 13 for Pittman's stats. In week 13, up against the Dallas Cowboys. In Dallas, he was the wide receiver 74.5 PPR, having 2 receptions on 4 targets for 16 yards. He has only scored over 15 half PPR points once in the last 7 games. He also only has 1 game this whole fucking season of over 20 half PPR points. And I know people love this matchup. This is one of those wet dream matchups. The Minnesota Vikings defense is absolutely atrocious against the pass. They rank 27th against the pass in DVOA, but how can anyone trust Matt Ryan? I definitely don't, and we also have seen Paris Campbell be a bigger target for Matt Ryan when he's under center. So I am staying clear away from Michael Pittman this week. It feels like a trap. Again, the Vikings defense is bad, and people are going to be like, oh, Michael Pittman's so good. And I agree, Michael Pittman's good, but this situation is, as they would say, no bueno. Next up, we move to Hollywood Brown. Marquise Brown of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the Denver Broncos in Denver. Week 14 up against the New England Deflatriots at home in Arizona. Wide receiver 56.5 PPR, 4 receptions on 8 targets for 34 yards. The Broncos rank 3rd against the pass via DVOA, and the reason why I'm nervous about Hollywood Brown has nothing to do with Hollywood Brown or his own health, and it has everything to do with the fact that Colt McCoy is under center up against one of the premier defenses in the NFL. I know the Broncos as a whole, they're terrible. They won't even have Russell Wilson in this game. It's going to be Brett Rippon. So not going to be a fun game either. You got Colt McCoy versus Brett Rippon. This game is going to be incredibly low scoring. And unless Colt McCoy finds Hollywood Brown on a deep down the field strike where he gets like a 50-yard touchdown, I just don't see how he ends up finishing as a top 32 receiver. I honestly don't see it at all. And yet people have him ranked in the top 32. I know he's a great player, but you have to take away and understand that while he's a great player, Colt McCoy being under center helps him not even an iota. Now we move to the final must-sit wide receiver here, and that is Joshua Palmer of the LA Chargers going up against the LA Titans at home in LA. Week 14 versus the Miami Dolphins. Wide receiver 43 in half PPR, 4 receptions on 6 targets for 53 yards. While the Tennessee Titans have the 28th ranked pass defense via DVOA, with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen back, it puts Palmer in a very difficult spot to succeed, especially since they also have Gerald Everett and they also have Austin Eckler. Now, could I see Joshua Palmer playing well? I definitely could. I really could see him having a smash spot because of how good of a player he is. But the problem is when there are so many players that are healthy, and Mike Williams wasn't even fully healthy last week, he's going to keep getting more healthy, and he's going to continue to see more and more targets every single week. So this puts Joshua Palmer in a very difficult spot for him to have a really solid game where he finishes inside the top 32. Obviously, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are not the definition of health, right? When you look up healthy NFL player, picture Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, probably wouldn't show up. But knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, of course. But Joshua Palmer, with all of the cooks in the kitchen here, it's a clear stay away. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Make sure you check out our sponsor of today's video, DraftKings Sportsbook. Check them out. Link in the video description or in the pinned comment. I love you guys all so much. Hope you all have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy!